DeShaun Foster is in the midst of a defining moment for his UCLA coaching tenure. 16 commits in the last month plus via the portal and the class of 2026. Counting maybe? Well, this will define the DeShaun Foster era, and it just might be the most impressive UCLA recruiting period in the last couple of coaching cycles.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. Welcome back, everydayers. Your everyday host of the Locked On UCLA podcast, also sports broadcaster, baseball coach, everything in between. Let's get ready to rock and roll. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Check it out. What we're talking about today, UCLA's recruiting dominance, UCLA baseball's Big Ten semifinal berth, and the UCLA softball super regional preview. All that and more. Let's get ready to rock and roll. So, as I teased in the open, UCLA with just about 16 commits, a lot of those in the spring transfer window, some of those coming with the class of 2026, which doubled the commit list in the last week or so for UCLA's class of 2026, which would still be counting if there's a commitment during this recording, after this recording. I would say that's some of the most dominant recruiting period moments in UCLA in recent history. Obviously, there's big-time recruits. It's a little different nowadays with NIL, the portal, flips, commitments, the lack of a national letter of intent, the NLI, if you remember that, and how things can change from the early signing period to the transfer portal. So much has changed for UCLA. They lost a commit that was a headlining QB signee, and he transferred in, and they got the better QB, his older brother. If you talk about the Iamaleavas, you've gotten additions to the running back room, bolstering the O-line, maybe not in this official transfer window, but they've done so much. DeShaun Foster went out, and if you think about it, prior to Easter in the early mid-April to now, all right, just about over a month plus, he has gone out and made this UCLA team buzzworthy in the national spotlight for a good few weeks. And while we're going to wait until UCLA football, right around 100 days away from now, kicks off against Utah August 30th in the Rose Bowl, those eyes are going to be on the Bruins, on Nico, on Iamaleava, on DeShaun Foster, who was laughed at for his lack of opening remarks at the Big Ten Media Days in 2024. Now, I think he'll be a little more prepared with his team, with his travel, with his remarks heading into 2025, as his team's roster construction shows so. That doesn't even include the overhaul of the coaching staff, the continual recruiting efforts of the guys on the road right now, trying to build a 2026 class, which had me worried. Obviously, their focus was to immediately improve this roster, all right? Let's think about some of the names that committed in the last month or so, all right? You've got a new punter, Will Carroll from Tulane. I already detailed what his numbers are. Had almost an 80-yard punt against Oklahoma, only a couple of touchbacks, has great numbers coming from Tulane. You got another tight end to bolster that room with Jake Renda from Pitt. You've got a couple of guys who are eye-opening in the quarterback room and the running back room. Javian Thomas from Cal. Obviously, Nico Iamaleava coming over from Tennessee makes UCLA a fascinating watch with what they can do on offense to pair with the new OC Tino Sinceri. Then you bring in, some defensive players like Keyshawn Bennett, Anthony Jones. And not to be confused for some of you UCLA fans out there, there have been two UCLA Anthony Jones to commit. You have one transferring from Michigan State, and you have one from Crane Lutheran who committed from Irvine. So you have to make sure you get those straightened out. For me, it got me a little confused for a moment. But you have one who is an edge, another one on the D-line. We'll talk about that more later. Another DB in Jameer Johnson. You add in Roderick Pleasant, who adds UCLA, who gives speed to the Bruins in the return game, on the track and field team, maybe in the secondary as the transfer from Oregon. You mix in a backup kicker. So the Bruins added defensively, offensively, skill positions, special teams, and are addressing all their needs to upgrade their roster and add depth at the same time. And oh, by the way, what they're upgrading and might not see next year with some of these players, because a transfer in might lose eligibility next year with going to the NFL draft, maybe be a super senior. He might transfer out. The Bruins are already trying to improve the D-line, which was a struggle in 2024 at times. So you get Anthony Jones, Yaya God, who came over from Tennessee at the UCLA recruiting event just about a week ago and committed on the spot. UCLA goes out and gets one of the better recruits in the state of Colorado, Camden Jensen, as a tight end. What is UCLA missing this year? The presence of Maliki Matavao and Bryce Pierre. While they do have a couple of guys coming in or returning from injury, that's a nice get for the Bruins. And Matthew Muasau keeping the SoCal familial connections to UCLA, right? And while he might be the lowest rated of those incoming guys, the Bruins have to bring in the talent, the linebacking room. And if you got a guy who's got that SoCal connection, the Bruins are adding to their landscape of where they can recruit. It's like, oh, we're building relationships. So many times you see the articles written about these guys. You never know how every single recruit's going to pan out, as much as it's important to do so, but it's the relationship building. Some of these guys have 2 or 3 brothers. Some of them are, as UCLA's brought in with Talanoa Ely, they're cousins of the Iamaleava. So it's a big family affair and a Mother's Day official visit. And DeShaun Foster gets it. You go back to Chip Kelly. Obviously, he brought in big-time transfer classes. He found some diamonds in the rough, all right, from the FCS level, finding guys who didn't play at Michigan, finding players who were just like, wait a minute, Jake Bobo, that's a stud. And all of a sudden, the UCLA 2022 offense was on fire with DTR, Charbonnet, and Bobo. You put all that together, and that was an explosive offense. How, for the most part, he built an offensive line, but he didn't consistently do it. DeShaun Foster is pairing, we're making the big moves. I will tell you, okay, discipline, respect, enthusiasm, I want that. But he has also this kind of cutthroat ability to be like, okay, we brought in Joey Aguilar, and we're going to still upgrade at quarterback in the middle of spring practice, the week or weeks leading up to our spring showcase, while we're trying to transition into a new offense, build our culture here at UCLA, and bring the eyeballs, bring the haters, as he said, and the fans to the Rose Bowl. He's done all that. And what did Chip Kelly not do? He'd focus on his transfer portal guys. He didn't really care too much about the further classes. And while Jim Mora brought in some great guys, I love the Jim Mora era in terms of modern UCLA football. Obviously, you go back well before that. There's great tradition for UCLA football. We're talking in this newer day and age, which is changing year by year. From Jim Mora's recruiting era to DeShaun Foster, completely different landscapes. And I think DeShaun Foster has ushered in UCLA's presence to the NIL, getting attention, showcasing that he actually cares about SoCal high school recruiting. Because if you just recruit in your own backyard, UCLA will most likely field a good football team. Got to get some guys in the trenches, some guys who can handle the cold. But overall, you will have a very good football team that can compete anywhere across the country. That's why all those SEC teams, those other Big Ten teams, even ACC teams at times, will come and raid the local SoCal recruiting events and be like, wait a minute, we're going to go and get some of these best players, because they're all around in Southern California or in the Western regions, or in some cases, the Pacific Northwest. And with the Bruins now Big Ten recruiting ties, they can go national while keeping close. So DeShaun Foster, getting his transfer class in the top 20, top 15, getting his 2026 class maybe into the top 20 by the time it's all said and done, with still a lot more to go leading into the summer months, into the fall of early signing period, whatever the recruiting and commitment's going to look like with NIL opportunities for these kids. DeShaun Foster has transformed it. And while the optics didn't look the best with how it played out with Joey Aguilar and bringing the Iamaleavas, the Bruins took advantage, maybe for a premium price in terms of like, hey, we got a discount here. We're not going to overpay this kid. We have set ourselves up for the future at the quarterback position, brought in more potential recruits, still keeping good connections with a 2026 QB like an Oscar Rios and Downey. And the Bruins have played all their cards right at this moment. I'd like to believe so. It's just about development, continuity, and culture. And can the Bruins put all those together with a solid product on the field? As college football continues to change in the 12-team CFP era, can the Bruins compete? They'll be entertaining. We'll just have to learn if they can compete in one of the more fascinating month-plus recruiting cycles for DeShaun Foster in both this year's cycle with the transfer portal in the spring and next year's 2026 class, growing by the moment. Speaking of growing by the moment, It's the UCLA baseball team, all right? They already had their Big Ten semifinal berth clinched with a win over Illinois, but they still needed a good win against Michigan. And who do they play in the semis? A showdown against the team the Bruins have not played just yet, but would love to get a big win against. Next on Locked On UCLA. The NBA playoffs are in full swing and every night delivers. Let me tell you, it delivers. Highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, can't miss moments, game-winning shots or game-tying shots, breakout players. There's been no better time to get in on the action than now with FanDuel because they make it easy to stay in on the game. Player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Maybe you're like, hey, maybe you're thinking the Knicks last night, right? You're like, they got a big lead, but maybe I'm going to hedge my bet and see if the Pacers do something a little crazy late. Well, they went crazy. And FanDuel, if you want to do player props, late game comebacks, maybe one of those things you want to check out on FanDuel is, hey, a late game odd for the Pacers to come back because they've done it in each and every round. You might want to check that out for the rest of the Eastern Conference Finals if you can get those in-game odds and combine it with the same game parlay all in FanDuel. And if you're a new customer, it's a perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, time to talk Big Ten tournament time. John Savage's club is already in the Big Ten tournament semifinals prior to their victory over the Michigan Wolverines, their second of the year. So that means the Bruins have swept both the Illinois Fighting Illini as they beat them 4 times in the year, and they beat Michigan in a midweek earlier in the year. In this one, a little bit of a closer affair. Let's go over the box score and the numbers here in this one. 7-5, UCLA won with another late game comeback. This time, UCLA jumped on the board early, 3-0 after the second. The Wolverines came right back, scoring 2 in the third, 2 in the fourth, to take a 4-3 lead heading into the fifth. The Bruins tied it in the fifth, 4-4, before Michigan held a 5-4 lead until the bottom of the eighth, where the Bruins scored 3 to win it 7-5. 7 runs, 10 hits, 1 error. Michigan, 5 runs, 8 hits, 1 error. So what did UCLA utilize pitching staff-wise? A day after they used 9 pitchers. They went bullpen. That was a plan. They went C.J. Bott, who went 2 in the third. They had Josh Alger, or I could say that you're saying that wrong, but inning in the third. Ian May, Ryan Reeses, and August Souza. All right, and the last 2 went 3 innings scoreless and kept the Wolverines off the scoreboard. 6 Ks, 3 walks. It was a lot of those free passes the Bruins were issuing. This time, kept that off the scoreboard, limited the damage, limited the hits to the early frames. That's the big bugaboo for this Bruins team. Are they going to be able to outscore their competition when it comes to these knockout portions of the Big Ten tournament, and more importantly, in the NCAA tournament? Now, I believe I saw a social media post, a tweet, or whatever you call them nowadays, by Eric Sonheimer of the LA Times, saying that Wyland Moss is expected back, a Bruins pitcher that would be a significant boost to this rotation and pitching staff that could help UCLA. But let's remember, after they beat Illinois, they had already clinched it. So it's not like UCLA was going to go full board on blowing up the bullpen. They do have a day off on Friday before they play their semifinals Saturday evening in Omaha. So a full almost day and a half of rest, if you will. They played 9 a.m. Central Time. I think it was listed when the game actually started, 7 a.m. Pacific Time against Michigan. So you have the whole rest of the day to rest. You have a full day off, and then you have another game. So you almost have like 48 hours of rest, if you will, in between games for the pitchers to rest and recuperate. And then it's single elimination, the semis to get to the championship game, which could very well help the RPI, which is already very good for the Bruins, or turn themselves into, all right, they're definitely going to host. UCLA's in that should host, but they can lock it up with a win over Iowa on Saturday. All right, that game's at 4 p.m. Pacific on May 24th in Omaha against the Hawkeyes. And I've talked my trash about the Iowa team. They're a team that's not even in. Iowa was the longtime Big Ten leaders for the majority of the regular season until Oregon went in there and swept the Hawkeyes. And I said Iowa's schedule against Oregon State, Oregon, and Washington on the road, their last 3 weekends, not in that order, but the last 3 weekends was going to be very tough. And what did they do? Iowa won 1 game in the last 3 weekends, had a tie, and lost everything else. So you had 1 win, 1 tie, and 7 losses heading into the Big Ten tournament. as what was supposed to be a 1 seed, a Big Ten champion. All they needed to do was win one game against Oregon, and they would have had the tiebreaker against UCLA, Big Ten co-regular season champs, and the 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament. Well, they took care of business, brought the magic back to Iowa City, and are now trying to do things in Omaha for a team that might be the first 4 out, might be the last 4 in, or the next 4 out. If you're looking at D1 Baseball, Baseball America, looking at the various outlets who are putting out their bracketologies, their college baseball brackets, if you will. And Iowa's on the verge. So Iowa needs this game. They need it. Like, they are putting everything they can to beat UCLA, because that would be a significant boost to the resume. I'm not sure if it's enough to put them in the tournament. But then if you win that game, you're in the championship game, which is the automatic berth anyway. So Iowa needs this game. And considering how much I think Iowa was a fraud with their Big Ten schedule was, not having to play UCLA, not playing Oregon until later in the year, playing Oregon State, Washington later in the year. I don't believe they had USC on the schedule. I could be wrong with that. That's off the top of my head. But just their schedule was very, very, very easy. And I'd love for UCLA to go in there. And again, they don't need to win, but would love to win to lock up hosting a regional, beat the Hawkeyes without blowing up your bullpen, because you still play Sunday, would be huge. And now I know there's a lot of crazy weather going on in the Midwest and the South and the Eastern regions. So as long as that doesn't bug anything, I haven't looked at the full weather report, but Omaha always deals with weather and rain and lightning. I remember when I went in 2019, that was a limited factor, but it does play a factor even in late May, like it will in late June, early July, when the College World Series is going on. The Bruins want to get that taste, right? They're undefeated in Omaha, bring those good vibes, win there and say, hey, we want to come back. That's the goal for every team in this Big Ten tournament. We want to be back here in one of those final 8 teams and eventually maybe raise the second crown ever for UCLA baseball in the baseball realm, all right? Maybe they can. Maybe they won't. But getting to the College World Series, navigating a new conference, a new era, would be a great achievement for John Savage, who's got many sophomores returning next year, expected to return. They have eligibility to their junior campaigns after one of the worst years he's had at UCLA. That would be a big turnaround. Big turnaround. Some of the guys who had some big days at the plate against Michigan, though, so we don't just overlook it. Roman Martin went 2 for 4. You had Rock Chalowski, who hit a bomb late in that game, 1 for 4. But it was Peyton Brennan, 2 for 3, with a couple of RBI and 2 runs scored. Aiden Espinoza, 2 for 3. You had Phoenix Call with a hit and an RBI. The Bruins really got the job done while only walking 3 times, putting the ball in play and putting the emphasis on the Michigan pitching staff to succeed. And UCLA won. So no ugly losses. I would love them to beat Iowa, get to the final. And for the most part, you get to the final, it's a single elimination. They're not going to overcomplicate, in my mind, they're not going to overcomplicate the selection show by UCLA getting to the Big Ten tournament title. All right. You lose to Iowa, that helps out Iowa so much more. And then I would just take back everything I said about them being frauds a little bit. I mean, Iowa's still a good ball club, but come on. If UCLA wants to prove that they're a team that's going to go far in the NCAA tournament, you don't lose to Iowa in the semis with 2 days off of rest. You win that game, you get to the final. You pretty much lock up your hosting a regional opportunity. You lock up the regional host bid. And it might be one of the last ones you get at Jackie Robinson in case UCLA has to change stadiums in the future. But that's a whole nother topic and a whole nother debate after the season or 2 or 3 down the line. Next, we are talking UCLA softball, going over a miniature preview, if you will, the Supers versus South Carolina. The Bruins, a 9 seed, going to Columbia. Might be some weather at the end of the weekend, but a huge sold-out crowd cheering on the Gamecocks. And with UCLA, the big team, the big name, and the overall legends of softball in the collegiate era, outside the modern dominance from Oklahoma, they're going to want to knock out the Bruins. All right, SEC versus Big Ten, the 2 big bad conferences. The Bruins, you got to win 2 games, get themselves to the Women's College World Series. What does it look like? We'll talk about it next. All right, final segment of the Locked On UCLA podcast. Zach with you guys. The Bruins taking on the Gamecocks, taking on South Carolina in the Super Regional in Columbia. So the Bruins going on the road after a dominant, very dominant weekend at home in Westwood, where they're about as dominant as could be. All right. Even the LA Times putting in a write-up, Ben Bolch, the UCLA beat writer, about how dominant Jordan Woolery and Megan Grant have been. The numbers are staggering. The best power hitting duo in a UCLA lineup ever, driving in runs, hitting home runs. They're as dominant as it gets, and they're as dominant as it gets across the country in hitting home runs and driving in runs. Megan Grant and Jordan Woolery. And I talked about how Megan Grant's ability to hit home runs in bunches could help them in the regional. Not so much because they were so dominant anyways, but in this one, this is where the UCLA pitching has to be huge, all right? UCLA can go with a combination of pitchers. They have three that Kelly Inouye Perez tends to rely on, the UCLA head coach, between Caitlin Terry. You can mix in Tinsley. You can mix in everything you want, but UCLA has to counter with South Carolina. I was listening to a quote about what the South Carolina coach was saying, what the Gamecocks could counter UCLA with, because the Bruins have a lot of left-handed bats. Sam Gress, if I'm saying the name correctly, 41 games played for South Carolina, is the right-hander who she said, based on her flight path of the ball, based on how she can get the ball in to lefties and move the ball with the same trajectory, it seems like, as a lefty, but out of a right-handed arm slot, is somebody who leads the Gamecocks in shutouts, leads her team in complete games, tied for the team lead in appearances, and has an ERA just under 3, and leads the team in innings pitched, in hits given up, runs, earned runs, walks, second on the team in strikeouts, and is that unique pitcher that can make a big difference. Now with Gress, she has a batting average against of 250, 12 wild pitches, has hit 9, and has the ability, or inability at sometimes, to be in the strike zone. 54 walks, hit a lot. So if you add in the 54 walks, the 9 hit batters, that's almost 60 free passes, more than 60 free passes, that the most important pitcher that South Carolina's coach said, hey, this is the person that can neutralize those UCLA lefties in their lineup. But if she's wild and the Bruins are patient, aren't getting jammed, they're not just hitting weak ground outs, weak pop outs, they're getting on base and driving in runs with 2 outs, because it's probably going to come down to more than Woolery and more than Megan Grant. The Bruins as a team has to prove that they're more than what they might call the Smash Bros, I think is what it said in the LA Times article that that Woolery and Grant were joking about as quote unquote best friends in that great write-up from Ben Bolch. I would encourage you to read that. That together, they just are dominant. And that's without talking about UCLA's leading hitter, Savannah Pola. So this is where UCLA can mix and match in the circle. You've got Caitlin Terry, Addison Fisher, Taylor Tinsley, who all can go in different ways. They mix and match, go 3 innings here, 4 innings here. Can the Bruins get the job done against a South Carolina team that started the year 20-0 before getting swept at Oklahoma? All right. South Carolina 43-15, went 13-11 in conference, but against some mutual opponents, the Bruins played Virginia. They lost, of course. South Carolina beat Virginia twice in 2 opening games at home against the Cavaliers. That's maybe the difference between UCLA hosting a regional and South Carolina, or hosting a super, and that's why South Carolina is selling it out in Columbia to host it. Let's look at some other opportunities. They started 20-0. They played Duke. Duke, who was a national seed. South Carolina went to Durham, North Carolina, and swept Duke. Like, that was some dominant play there by the Gamecocks early in the year before they went to Oklahoma. Now, they did have a 5-game losing stretch, losing to the Sooners, losing to Coastal, and losing to Georgia, but finally got on cue by beating Texas Tech, winning the series against Georgia, getting a win against Clemson, and who the South Carolina coach compared UCLA to, LSU and Texas A&M, the number 1 seed, LSU another top overall, top 16 seed. South Carolina beat LSU on the road 2 out of 3. And LSU is one of those teams like Texas A&M that lost in the opening round. I'm not sure that was made to be a slight against the Bruins, but it is notable that she views them in the same talent, same ability to pitch, to swing the bats as the number 1 team in the country, at least was Texas A&M, and LSU, but those are also 2 teams that fell victim to early round upsets in their own home regionals. You continue on, you see, okay, they got big wins against Ole Miss. This is a very good team in South Carolina at home, but one of the more puzzling losses was losing at Auburn and then finding themselves on the wrong end of a beatdown at the end of the SEC tournament against Texas A&M. Their only time they played the number 1 team in the country, although who's still live, South Carolina. Who's not? Texas A&M. South Carolina also swept through the regional. They gave up 2 runs without scoring as much as the Bruins. South Carolina 16-2. The Bruins 3 run rule victories en route to utter dominance for a regional victory to get to the Super. So the Bruins in a game that starts at 10 a.m. local time on a Friday, 10 a.m. in Los Angeles, 10 a.m. Saturday against the Gamecocks Pacific time, and Sunday where there is weather expected. If you're UCLA, you don't want to test with poor weather delays or everything in between. South Carolina is 34-5 at home. 34-5, almost unbeatable. A weekend that's all sold out full of Gamecock fans all around the ballpark in Columbia. The Bruins, sometimes the resume, the impact, just those simple couple of losses at the end of the weekend, right? To an Arizona, to Virginia, losing to LSU. 1 or 2 of those games could have flipped UCLA and South Carolina, and this regional super regional could have been in Los Angeles. That's how different it is. But the Bruins are as battle-tested as it gets, as good with the sticks as they've been all year. Some of the most powerful bats and some really good bats in their lineup from the transfer portal, from some juniors who have truly figured it out. It's going to come down to which team figures it out in the circle. And I think UCLA has a few more options than South Carolina, but both teams can swing it real well. They've seen some of the best competition, some similar competition, and had some similar results, although South Carolina's come out on top in a closer game against some teams the Bruins have lost to. Even then, UCLA had a pretty tough, scrappy regional with UCSB, with San Diego State, ASU, even though the Bruins never saw ASU, and the Bruins came out on top with dominant fashion. It's different on the road, though, and we'll find out. We'll try to recap as much as we can throughout the weekend. The Bruins run to the Women's College World Series to Oklahoma City as they try to end this freaking Sooner dominance. For now, you got to beat South Carolina and get that opportunity and see if you can ride the run to a national championship. But until then, until next time, we'll talk more UCLA softball, baseball, and, of course, football, basketball, and everything in between here on Locked On UCLA. Hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.